Should be live here momentarily on YouTube.
Yep. Looks like we're live. So I'll open this up by saying welcome to the August 3rd, 2020 Town Council Communication Committee meeting, and I call this meeting to order. Item number 2 is the roll call. Liam, again, Liam's new to this, so we're gonna work out some of the things. I'm assuming you're taking minutes, Liam?
I can. I'm prepared to do so.
Okay. Could you call the roll, please?
Sure. Councilor Gleistein?
She's on mute.
I'm here, and I just wanted to say again, I may or may not have video. I'll do it when I can, but right now I will definitely be here and I can hear everything and see everything. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Councilor Clucci?
Here.
And Councilor Johnson?
Here.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to, without objection, make a motion to amend this agenda and change item 5, which was committee discussion on after our guest speaker speaks, and change that to read the town manager overview of the proposed communication and community engagement coordinator position. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Liam, could you call the roll?
Sure. Councilor Gleistein?
Yes.
Councilor Clucci?
Yes.
And Councilor Johnson?
Yes.
Great.
Thank you, Liam. Item number 3 is the approval of our June 8th meeting minutes. Now, this might be sensitive. I can't locate them. They weren't in the packet and I don't see them on the, it's no big thing. I think we could push that off to another meeting. Is that correct, Tom? I mean, it's part of the protocol, but it's definitely not a showstopper. So we'll just push that off to the next committee meeting. We'll approve two monthly meetings.
Perfect.
Minutes.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. So item number 4, we have a guest speaker today. It's Mr. Eric Conrad. And I want to thank you, Eric, for joining us. Eric is the Director of Communication and Educational Services at Maine Municipal Association. He's done a cursory review of some of our communications tools, and he's got some insight and maybe some suggestions, and we appreciate your presence.
Thank you.
So I'm going to turn it over to you, sir. We'll keep this real informal. You can share your thoughts, and we can just have an open discussion if you don't mind.
Great. That's the way I'd prefer it too. Yeah, I think I'll talk for just a brief amount of time, but then I think what I'd really benefit from is from you telling me where you think as a committee that you stand in terms of your communications goals, what they are, what you're trying to achieve, how fast you'd like to get there, that kind of thing. Because I think it would really help. And if there are questions that come up today that either I feel like I should do more research for, like I've done a little bit already and get back to you, or even if we want our legal services staff, if something would come up like that, that I need to ask them a question and get back to you and Tom and your committee, I'd be happy to do that. So this doesn't have to be the end of it. It can just be step 1 if you want to look at it that way. Just to get going, I really appreciated, Ken, when you reached out to me. And I had Ben Thomas, he does the technical part of our website and our social media stuff, look at your website as well. And you have a really great array of tools. And I know you just added the town leader tool. I don't think you need to do anything more. I could go through, I can share the screen if you want me to, and go through the handout that I sent the committee last week.
Sure.
But I think a good thing to ask yourselves would be, what are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to just get better informed citizens, especially year-round property tax paying citizens? Are you sort of feeling like you're not where you should be with that? Is that the goal? And then keeping in mind that, I put this in my memo to you, it never stops. I mean, right. One thing it's frustrating when you're a journalist, and that's a lot of my background. I've been in MMA for over 10 years now, but here as well as an executive committee member, and I'm not saying in Scarborough, our executive committee might say, well, if we only communicated it well, like there's a silver bullet, everybody would remember it for the next 5 years. And that's just not the way communications works. It's an ongoing process. It never stops. And repetition, and this is in my memo, repetition is the key to effective communications and marketing. It's why politicians pound on their successful messages over and over again at the federal level. It's why car dealers are always in our face with their ads, because it never stops. So I guess I'll stop there and just see if there's anything you want to talk about with your goal setting, how you feel about Scarborough's communication success so far. Again, I think you're doing a great job in terms of how hard you're trying. The tools that you're using are really good tools. I don't think you need to add any more. I mean, from my experience, the way you guys are going after it, and I think Tom has a podcast or something going too,
Right.
you guys are doing just about everything you could possibly do in terms of trying and using your tools. It may just be a question of what your expectations are. And then I do want to talk to you guys as we go through this about developing, starting to identify which tool is more effective for which audience. That's a really key piece that I think I can help you with. So I'll stop there and then chime back in when you want me to.
Well, I'll open that up with just a level set. You know, communication is a big topic. We, being the town council communication committee, are really responsible for communicating the town council's work. So, but that doesn't mean we disregard everything else, same as the admin side. You know, I think you might have seen our e-newsletter, which is, I think, a fantastic publication. It goes out twice a month. A lot of people really rave about it. It tells you about what's going on, gives you interesting facts, introduces new employees. And we, as a town council, actually have a section in there called Town Council Corner. And we discuss items that are in front of the town council and not necessarily administrative functions. So our goal really is to collaborate with the administration, with the town management, communicate the town council's work, and bring it all together like we're like we're a team, because we are a team. We're the moving parts, right? The town council's the moving parts. But so I think it's all the different tools that we've got, how we can get them to work better together. I mentioned to you, we have a new dedicated place on the Leader. That is going to be monthly. It was going to be weekly, but I listened to my town manager and he gave me some great insight about the amount of work that would take to communicate on a weekly thing. So we've gone back and brought that back to, I'd rather go for, I really wanted to go for more and ended up going for less, with the agreement that if it does become, you know, after we get our wheels really greased well, that we can come back and go weekly or bi-weekly. They're very flexible. So, you know, my interest is to really how to coordinate all the tools together. Like you mentioned, Tom's got a blog. We also have one little thing. It's a small thing, but I think it's very powerful. Is we have an electronic board out in front of the town hall that we have traffic rolling by, everybody going back and forth to work. So that's another point of interest that we can just alert,
Yep.
congregate, and communicate some more of the bigger issues. So that's where I'm standing. Council Gleistein or Clucci, do you have any additional comments that you would like to make on what our objective is? No?
So I'm happy to say something. Yeah, I think, consistency is definitely, a challenge, and consistency across the tools for the message. And, hopefully, we're doing some upgrades to the tech. It can be very difficult to find information, but I think apart from the actual, tech tools and how our documents are organized and how you can find things, I think it's a challenge to figure out how to, anticipate in some ways what people are really going to be interested in, and maybe defining categories of items that really should get more information out ahead of time to the town. So, for example, there's a lot that goes on in ordinances that are very important and people are very interested in. And we definitely had certain ones, that have got some different communication tools we've occasionally used with them. But you think that maybe an ordinance, maybe about a rooster is going to be no big deal. And that one turned out not to be no big deal, but you never know. I think people feel like they get caught unawares quite a bit in Scarborough. And in the case of the ordinances, you really have to drill down several layers into, you have to actually know how the town works, how the committee works, where to find the committee webpage, how to land on that, how to go back to the calendar, how to open the agenda to find out what's coming up on the ordinance agenda. And I'm just using this as an example. And then sometimes it'll just say future business, and actually a pretty hot topic won't be brought up with that. So I would really think, if we could find a way to categorize and classify what would be hot topics, and then, feature them prominently somewhere that people can have access to, maybe a couple of different places in a consistent manner, like you're saying, a growth management ordinance, that's going to be a hot topic. Trying to think some of the other ones we're dealing with. I mean, budget is a no-brainer. Everyone knows that's a hot topic. But we have so many that come along. We have a new CEA coming along. These are all things that folks are really interested in, but we don't always get them out consistently and easy to find. So, and again, you're kind of trying to anticipate some. So maybe there's a way to categorize things so that we would, from our own attention, say, hey, this is something that's going to impact XYZ. Let's make sure and get that out. Something like that.
That's a good point. And feeding off to that, our very first town council leader article is August 7th. So that's next Friday. It's about growth. And the intent was to get the interest in growth, because we have an ordinance meeting on the 16th, the following week, where the ordinance committee is collaborating with a long-range planning committee and have a discussion on growth, because there are several people in town that are a little concerned about our growth, but it's just a way to open up the discussion. And like Councilor Gleisting was just mentioning, I think that's a good example of stringing items together to make them cohesive and drive people either into the meetings or into our website for further detail. So,
one of the things I've struggled with in my whole professional career is really the timing of information.
correct.
Speaking of ordinance development, there are literally months of, good productive discussion before even words get put on a paper. And inevitably, some will think you've gone too far by the time you've shared a document, that there's been months of discussion. But by the same token, you need to have something tangible for people to see, review, and react to.
Right.
So that's a real challenge for almost everything that the council does.
Yep. Well, back, to that point, and like what Councilor Gleisting was mentioning, I just started, COVID is definitely, not to make excuses, but COVID's interrupted everybody's life, everybody in the town, and in this committee also. So we were just ramping up a Be Informed campaign to try to make a cohesive, the mechanics of communicating when COVID struck. So we're just now starting to reignite that. That's why I was very pleased with the leader thing. But I've started, very similar to what Councilor Gleisting just mentioned, just using a Google Sheet to start bulleting categories of items, like growth, and under that there's topics like traffic, development, senior housing, affordable housing, CEAs. So, and then general information. What's an executive session? There's opportunity to also to break some perceptions. I'm new to the council. I ran based on my perceptions of being a resident. Now I'm part of the council, and all my fellow residents think I'm a converter. You just join them and change. There's no, I join them and I understand. So I really want the folks in our town to understand also. And you can do that just by placing the facts out there without bias, without a slant. So again, I've started a category thing I'll share with John and Betsy after this meeting, so we can build it upon Because I would think ideally, we can get a bunch of, for lack of a better term, boilerplate articles that can be, of interest at any time. If we don't have anything hot in the pipeline, we can push out and publish some good information that will people go, oh, I never understood that, and now I'm glad I do. So, yes, John.
And I guess a couple of things that I'd add to that. When you're talking about communication mechanisms, I think the sign in front of SETCO has been pretty useful or handy as well. I tend to get a lot of good information I didn't necessarily know just by driving Route 1. So that's something that we should kind of consider. I suspect that we have some control over what messages go there because
With
it's
SETCO, right? Yeah.
town related. Yeah. And then on the other side with the, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but with the new leader, counselor corner and the leader, one of the things that I've struggled with is when you look at the school board, they always communicate as one voice, right? So they take a vote and then they communicate that way. The way our council operates, and I think this is probably a strength, is a little different than that, in that we each have our own opinions, but we don't necessarily have our own soapbox to convey those opinions. Right. And when we try to convey something as a council, that's tricky because we're inadvertently turning off some of our base by doing that. So that's just something I think that as you try to standardize the mechanism, like you're going to talk about growth in the leader this week, that's you or a couple counselors' perspective on growth, I think.
Right.
And maybe overall, there's a council goal to evaluate the growth management ordinance that we all agreed to earlier in the year. But it's always been a difficult dynamic, I think, to walk a fine line between seeming like we're all thinking the same thing along the same lines versus just trying to get messages out there and solicit feedback.
Correct. So Eric, I'd like your feedback on that.
Yeah, let me weigh in. A lot to go through there, and great. I mean, all your observations are very good ones. But I think part of what I noticed when I looked at your stuff and the community television site primarily is if you look at some of your word choices, and this could be in any of the platforms you're using. It could even be verbal, like what you put on the headline about an upcoming verbal presentation. Something like growth management, you were talking about that. Maybe that excites everybody in your community, but I would bet there's a lot of people in your community that don't know exactly what you're talking about when you say growth management, where you might be talking about a neighborhood on Higgins Parkway with 464 homes proposed. And that the word choice, new development on Higgins Parkway, is going to entice a lot more people to say, whoa, what's this all about, than growth management discussion. You see what I'm saying? So like when I looked at your TV site, there was something that said video on demand. And when you clicked on that, it was pretty cool, like what was below it. But if I were a new citizen in town and I knew that you were archiving your meetings and you archive all of your meetings, which is awesome, I think a better headline on that would be, go here to watch our meetings here. That's what you're doing with video on demand. You're really not doing videos of Aladdin or something. You're doing videos of what you're doing for your town. So I would encourage you to kind of go through all of your subject headers and be as specific as you can, not only for what you think residents want, but what you want them to see. Okay, you want them to go to your old meetings and look at them, because in some ways, if Tom gets a developer who says, I want to know what happened in the October of 2018 meeting, he can just say, go there and look at it. So you want to make that as easy as you can. When we switched to a CMS platform for our website, I think it was 5 years ago, it gave me an opportunity to do all of this at MMA. And our website is not perfect. It can be too complicated too, just like Betsy was saying. But we did change a lot of our headers to make them more specific. And I'll give you one example. We had something called Marketplace at MMA. And I was here for 5 years and I didn't know what the heck that meant. And now we say how to do business with MMA. So if you want to advertise or you want to buy a manual or you want to buy it, that's where you go to do business with MMA, which is better than guessing what we mean by marketplace. Right. So I would say that. To Tom, what you were saying earlier about struggling, when to communicate, I don't know that there's a right or wrong there. I think what I really like about what Scarborough is doing, and I bet what you personally do, Tom, is you're communicating as often as you can and you're trying really hard. And I would way rather have all of our members take that approach and be told that they're communicating too much too soon than than not communicating at all, or trying to slip things through. And then, history is replete with examples of covering up things if it's negative, or trying to avoid a controversy, and then you have a major controversy because you were trying to avoid it all along. So I think going early and staying on message and repeating it is way better. It's probably the right way to go. It's certainly better than trying to time it toward the end and get lucky. I wouldn't sweat it at all if that's what you're doing. I talk at elected officials workshops about this a lot. And I grew up in the shadows of Penn State University, and we all know what happened there with their football scandal. And if they would have addressed that when that guy was doing what he was doing, which was roughly up until 2002, it would have been terrible, but it wouldn't have been as bad as it was 10 or 12 years later when a reporter found out about it and broke the lid right off, and they had covered it up for 10 or 12 years, and people got arrested, and Joe Paterno got fired, and his statue got taken down, and the whole 9 yards. So what you guys are doing up front and trying so hard is good, and I would just get it out there early. In terms of what people are going to react to, and I think that these elements are true whether they're visitors to your community, summer residents, and I know Scarborough pretty well, or year-round people. The elements of news in journalism are what's going to excite people, and some of the key elements are how close is it to me? Proximity is a key one. Now, everything in Scarborough is proximate to people in Scarborough, sort of. But if I live on Higgins Beach and you're talking about a growth management statute on Higgins Beach, I'm really going to be reading for that one. So if that's in your subject header and I'm your intended audience, make sure that's in there, not just growth management action coming up. I might miss it. Okay. So proximity is key. How unusual something is. Has this ever happened before in Scarborough? Or this is the only second time it's happened. I mean, look at the way we're all talking about that shark attack off Bailey Island, because it never happened before in Maine, right? So we're all talking about it. Oh my God, can you believe that happened? So that's another key thing. How recent something is. So if you just took an action, people are going to talk about it right after you took it, more than 6 months or 12 months later. And then of course you're trying to communicate things in advance. And the closer you get to the big date of the hearing or the statute enactment, that's when you really want to be prominent and make sure your message is out there, along with, I think, what Tom was saying earlier, laying that groundwork. So there's key elements of news, and sometimes you have those things together. Sometimes you will be pushing about, and I'm making this up, of course, but a really unusual approach to zoning on Higgins Beach that you've never done before, and it's only been done once on the East Coast. Well, that you're putting some of those news elements together, you could really get people talking, or be prepared that they're going to talk about it as well. Even if you're not sure that they will. Those are the kind of the key elements. So I wanted to talk to you about the consistency. The complicated part that Betsy was talking about, all websites that I've had any experience with get complicated the more you drill down. And unfortunately for government, some of the stuff you have to put out there, like the word ordinance and the word budget workshop, and some of those words are sort of boring. And yet you have to structure what you're doing like that. So just do the best you can. But again, when you're talking about it, when you're writing about it for the Scarborough Leader, when you're using subject headers in your email newsletters, try to get keywords in there that are not generic, that are like specific about what's in that growth management law that you think people need to know and are going to react to. Some of those word choices, and again, they can be verbal as well as written. They can really go a long way. So I'll stop there. I have a lot of other thoughts, but I'll stop there for the time being.
Great. Yeah, I'd like to respond to that, because in reading your review and sending it to us before, something really struck home with me, and it was a point that I think Tom had just mentioned also. We just had a topic come up on an ordinance committee, was 5G. 5G is a hot topic across the nation. I think it was advertised, at least on our webpage, that it was coming. But once the meeting came, I think we had 2 meetings on it. And then kind of what you mentioned, everybody went, wait a minute, where did this come from? Why was I not invited? Why did I not know about it? And it was very legitimate, because if you're not totally, I have this little anecdotal thing coming. I'm coming home from a hard day's of work. One of the last things I want to do is log on to the web page to find out what's going on in the town today. A good thing on that is, and I'm not sure if the other committee members know this, starting August 17th, We have a new feature on the website that's going to allow residents to sign up for alerts, to get agendas, to get items at the committee level. One of them would be ordinance. And if they subscribe to that, when things get posted, they're going to get alert. I do believe they even get the agenda. Do you know if that's correct, Tom? I don't want to overstate it, but
No, I think so.
no,
Yeah. Yep.
that's the goal. It might not run as smooth as we would all like at first, but I am just excited about the option of being there. So
You guys are doing, you
I
guys
mean,
are doing so well with that stuff. I mean,
we
that's,
represent the people. We, you know, if we're aware of what's in the pipeline, we should be able to anticipate where the energy is going to be. And then that's where our focus should be up front to start streaming the communication, because we want the public engaged, involved. We don't want to be felt like we're in that back room making decisions that it's all over by the time they join. So I really think we have the tools to do it.
you
I
do.
think it's just, you know, getting the ambition and the passion to get it done.
Well, you have the tools to do it. I also just thought, you know, I think you're trying really hard, and I think you're probably doing really well. But just don't. A lot of, you know, I don't want to sound like Mr. Negativity here, but a lot of people will tell you, well, I wish you would have told me, when you've told them 10 times in the previous 2 months, and any number of ways, and they got the damn email, and didn't you read it? Well, oh, I didn't see that one. You know, a lot of people, they're just so busy doing other things, or they want to know about what you guys are doing when they want to know it. If you're going to increase my taxes 5%, I want to know that. But when you're not, I don't know. I don't know how worked up I am about. I know you guys are passionate about it, but they might meet. So part of, you know, communications, and I've been doing this a long time, is you just have to accept that you're sort of swimming against the tide of human nature sometimes. But you can always show how hard you've tried, how consistently you've tried. You can increase that level of awareness from 20% to 30% to 40%, and accept the fact that it's never going to be 80 or 90 or 100. It's just not. But you can be more effective, but you're never going to solve it. You know what I mean? And I hear that from our executive committee again, every so often, every year or two. Well, if we only marketed what we were doing more with the State House on revenue sharing, people would all get it. Well, revenue sharing is kind of boring if you're not state government or municipal government. So we're on TV, we're doing everything we can, and people are saying they don't. You know, we can only get so far, is what I'm saying. So just to a degree, accept the fact that this is going to be a nonstop process.
Right.
It really is for all of us for the rest of our lives. It just, to some degree,
Right.
you just have to accept that. You know?
I think that's, you know, it's very true. You know, responsible citizens have a responsibility to, you know, find information and to stay informed of what's going on. You know, at the same time, you know, I think one of the things that we haven't had a chance to do yet, which I would still encourage, you know, this committee to work with the town. And we had given Larissa a list of residents who wanted to be in the focus group on the new website. We had some sharp folks, some lesser sharp folks, you know, and these were like people, you know, we stood outside the polls, 3 of us throughout the day in March to talk to people about communications in the town. And a lot of what I heard was, you know, I went on just to find this form to, you know, apply for a building permit or whatever it was. I'm making that up. And it was very difficult to find. You know, I went on to try to register for the newsletter and I couldn't find out how to do it. I went on. So I think we, you know, one of the most important things, I spend a lot of time looking at municipality websites, is people being able to find what they need. So it's like you're saying, we can't always tell them exactly what they need, but, you know, we have an incredibly active town and people want to find what they want to find when they want to find it.
Right.
And you wouldn't understand our content, you know, just looking at what's in front of you. But the budget portal this year really had some challenges. I personally could not find a number of things on the budget challenges. I think we stepped up partway through in the budget portal and tried to change things. There's still some missing things even from last fiscal year. So content is really important. And I think a focus group with citizens and residents, not to be critical or not to say we're not doing things well, but just to say, hey, let's get a group of folks in here. We don't think of everything. What are they looking for? What would you do that? And we had given Larissa a list of that. COVID kind of changed things, and then we rolled out the website, but that doesn't mean we still couldn't do that focus group. Because to me, there's push information, which this group had pushed for the subscriptions to the agendas. I don't believe that's been tested yet. We haven't really rolled that out. And that way people can subscribe. These are people who want to subscribe to an agenda. And of course, they're interested in it if they subscribe to it. So that's a help. And then there's pull information, which, you said you went to our SCTV or our video on demand. Our YouTube channel is not organized right now. It's, you might be able to find stuff. Our SCTV is a little more organized. I think, we really need to get feedback from folks about what they're looking for. And this isn't just meeting related or council related. The comments I heard at the election that we worked the polls to get feedback from folks was, I went to find kind of this common thing, just, something that's anybody would look for as a new resident in town. How do I recycle? Or, I'm not saying that, but, I hope that we'll put that on the list and still have a good focus group that goes through. And I think the idea was we were going to give them a list of things to find. They were going to give us a list of things that they might look for. And we would kind of set out a group of counselors and residents to say, okay, how do we go do this? To see how successful we are. To the best of my knowledge, we've never done anything like that. And maybe head off a little bit of the frustration that people have trying to find information. I think another thing that we could do far better is we give great presentations at our town. Our town manager does, our assistant town manager who just left, she did. I'm sure our new assistant town manager / HR director will. We have developers come in. We do give a lot of really good presentations. They're not readily accessible to people ahead of the meeting. Sometimes that's because people are working on them right up to the front, but we need to have like a folder that is like, here is where all the documents are that are not minutes. It's not recordings. It's not official town documents, really. It's presentations that are happening that are an easy place for people to find, easy for people to go on. Maybe we're not utilizing the website quite as much next to the meeting, but it's really hard to follow a presentation when you don't actually can't download it and have it. And we're a fast moving town. It's certainly understandable that not everybody can get a presentation ready 4 days before it's going to be given, because information is dynamic. It can change. I think if that could just be put out, right before the meeting at the very last resort, then residents would feel like they have access to that information as we're going through it. So,
Well, let's talk about that.
Areas I think we could improve.
Yeah, I think we should have a discussion of this committee, because the information that you're talking about typically is council type work, right? It's not about beaches. It's not about licensing your dog. It's about items that will come in through the council. Maybe we can have that discussion with Liam and maybe whoever's taking that new position. Maybe we can have that discussion, and we could have our own focus group.
Can I ask a question there? I'm just curious, though, I've heard you a couple of times make a differentiation about communicating the council's business and communicating the staff in the town's business. As I am an elected official, actually, but why make that distinction? Because you guys end up voting on dog ordinances anyway, don't you? I mean, I'm just wondering if your citizens and your summer residents make that same differentiation.
Well, they may not. I mean, I look at the charge for this committee, and it's typically council-related information. That's why. I mean, the administrative, it's a bad term. The management of the town takes care of the softer type information about, where are the beaches, where are the trails, how do you license your dog, how do you get a building permit. When I'm talking council, I'm talking not only town council, but also town council appointed committees. So that's a broad range. That's planning, that's long range planning, that's zoning. That's all. That's the information that kind of impacts the citizens. All information is valid and relevant, but I'm a boundary guy. I understand boundaries, and I understand that there are certain things that staff needs to communicate that the council isn't involved with. So that's why I'm separating them. But hopefully we collaborate together, and we have in the past.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you're saying. In MMA, we always talk about, the town manager form of government that, if you will, Tom and his staff run the daily operations, and you guys set policy, you set priorities, and you set the budget. But I would say that when some of those topics change, it often ends up being an action that you or your planning board or something else takes. So to some of your citizens, when there's a formal change happening, that's when Tom or his staff is coming to you and saying, we want to change the transfer station hours. You probably have to vote on that before that happens, or increase your fees. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah.
I think some people that might not be at the end as distinct as maybe you're trying to make it. I wanted to get back to a couple things Betsy said, though, because I really like the idea, Betsy, about focus groups. One thing I would recommend is if you have a couple leading critics, to try to get them on the focus groups.
Oh, we have a few.
Two things. Number one, I'm sure you'll have a few. Number one, it incorporates them, and they end up being just like Ken. They end up being, wow, I didn't realize we were doing all this and trying this hard. So they're often opinion leaders, maybe negative opinion leaders in your community. So you might be able to win them over, at least to some degree. But they often do have good insight too. If they're struggling to find something on your website, they're probably not the only ones struggling to find those 2 or 3 items on your website. So, and especially if you start hearing that from 3 or 4 people on those focus groups, then you're on to something. It's not just one person saying it, but now you have a mini trend going, and you should look at how are we describing that? Are the words we're using clearly pointing them in the right direction? Should we raise the prominence? Should it just be something on our homepage or one splash page below it? Then you can start having those kinds of strategic decisions. In addition to focus groups, I mentioned this in my memo to you. In about another 6 months, once this Scarborough Town Leader column gets underway, and I do think it was a good idea to do it monthly, not weekly, you can start surveying, do a real quick Survey Monkey survey, probably 10 questions or less. Resist the urge of doing more. Describe yourself, are you a year-round resident? Do you have kids in school? Do you own property? No more questions about themselves than that. And then say, which tool are you using? Which tool do you like the best? A couple questions. You want to see if there's a different audience, and I guarantee you there is, among your Facebook page, your email newsletter, your website, even your sign on US 1, which we think about how many people drive by that sign. I bet you majority are not even from your town, but they're still looking at your sign. You want to start figuring out which tools have which audience. A real important decision then, as you evolve your strategic thinking behind your tools. Your tools are great. Okay, and we're doing it at MMA right now. When I put stuff on Facebook and Twitter, I'm not even sending that for you guys. I'm sending that for non-members, because we know that's the audience that's following us on Facebook and Twitter isn't municipal members. I mean, they're a significant minority, but it's not the majority of people following it. So when we send emails, it's to you guys. When we do stuff in the magazine, you get it. Although there's a public aspect to that. When we put stuff on their website, a lot of it's for you. But when we use these public communication tools, I'm thinking strategically. If we're in a political fight, I'm sticking it to my opponent on Facebook, because I know my audience is different there. We already have you in our corner. So I would encourage you to do a real brief Survey Monkey thing. Once the Town Leader column is established for 4 or 6 months, and start asking your people which ones they're following, which one they like the best, and see if your summer residents aren't saying, I'll go to this one, and your year-round residents are saying, I love the Town Leader thing, and I go to your website. Just see if there's a difference.
Yeah.
And then finally, you probably have some analytic tools at your staff's disposal about what the most read parts of your website are. Your search tool is probably right up there, I would guess. But like on our website, the runaway best part of our website is the job bank, where our jobs are. Because a lot of people in municipal government are looking for jobs, seeing what jobs are open, seeing how their salaries compare, but also people are thinking about getting into municipal government, which is, I know you guys have gone through some furloughs, but it's still a stable form of employment. That's our number one part of our website, and we always keep that in mind. We've spent a lot of time, this is a negative example from MMA, our legal staff especially in the past, spent hours and hours and hours doing vast manuals and packets. And when we did our website analytics, honestly, some of them were read by like 7 times a year. So it's like, why are we spending 40 hours on something that, virtually on our website, nobody's going to? I mean, some people do stick it on their bookcase like I have behind me, but it can really help you guys decide where the public interest is, how hard you might have to try to generate public interest in an area if you want to. So you probably have web analytic tools at your disposal too. So all three of those things: focus groups with negative people on it, some kind of quick monkey survey, in 6 months, it's 10 questions or less, and then see if your web analytics can help you find out where your traffic is right now, and then see if that changes over time. I'll stop.
Tom, did you have something to say earlier? I'm sorry.
Yeah, a couple of comments. Do recall that this is a representative form of government, so all of you have been elected to make decisions on behalf of your residents. Now, there's any number of ways to get input to know where your residents want to go with something. What I found to be successful is to add additional process to a topic, if you will. You're technically a single vote of council is required for a certain matter, but it may make sense to elongate it and have an extra workshop. And that extra time can bring people into the fold or allow time for you to get further input. So I think process is really important. And I think when we can, we should layer additional process as best we can. And frankly, I think we do that pretty well. I guess the other point I would make, and this is more the collaboration, my first and foremost goal is to make sure that I'm communicating with you, the decision makers, and that you have all the information you need. Now, 99% of that is certainly for public consumption as well. And I think we do a decent job of serving that up in a timely fashion as well. But I guess I will just admit that I am often myopic in my approach, and that I am so focused on getting things ready for the next agenda and making sure you have what you need. Also, though I live in town, I don't have wide social. We all have different social networks, I should say. So, helping advise staff what you think is a hot topic would be really important, because you're connected in the community in a different kind of way. Something may not even be intuitive to me that it's something that really is going to resonate with a certain population. So I guess the point is, this really needs to be a collaborative kind of approach here to make sure that we are doing it consistently and really accentuating those things that we anticipate are going to be hot topics.
Agree. Eric, I was asking, do you have any idea on how to measure any thresholds to measure success? For example, this committee was charged with doubling our subscription of our e-newsletter. When we came in, I think we were at 1,450. We're at about 1,800 now. COVID because we had a campaign, but that kind of involved a lot of interpersonal communications and passing out materials. So that got deferred for a while. But when do you think we should feel that we have successfully brought in enough residents that we are communicating? We have 8,500 homes. We've got 1,800 subscribers to our newsletter. I think we've got about 4,500 for our Facebook, Tom. I think Larissa said that, but we're not sure if those are all residents.
I'll bet you a lot are not.
Right.
And that's fine. Just use the tool with that in mind.
Yeah, a good thing about the leader is that that's delivered, in-home free to everybody. So all 8,500 homes will get the leader. But where do we find that we can feel that we've been successful communicating to her?
It's so hard to quantify it. We're not a public-facing association, and our Facebook likes are less than 3,000, so less than you. And you think, well, that's not very good in a state of 1.3 million, right? But California is like 4,000, and they have 40 million people, and we have one, the California League. So we're killing them. And think how many municipal employees they have in the state of California. So it's so hard to quantify it. I think that when you guys are, like Tom just said, you guys are all you wouldn't be in office if you weren't attuned to your community. If you're getting a sense right now that people are legitimately, not just making an excuse, but legitimately not knowing enough about local government, keep striving. At some point, I think you'll feel better about that. Maybe after the focus groups, maybe after the surveys. But I don't think, Ken, there's any way to put a number on that. I would just say that the number of tools you guys have is, I wish all of our, especially our major towns and cities, were doing what you're doing. They're not. And let me give you another example. Portland just had a, they're going through a lot of issues right now, as you know. They have a full-time communications director, Jessica Grondin. She was hired, I don't know, 5 or so years ago. I think she does a really good job. But they're not satisfied with that either, especially communications within their minority community. So it never really becomes something that you can prove that you've arrived. I don't think.
It's
I'm
never
sorry.
ending, right? You
Right.
can never, you can always do more.
Right.
Arguably.
And you guys are trying super hard. Again, you always have that fallback. If somebody says, why didn't you tell us about this, to show, look at the 7 times we did tell you about it, and the various ways that we did. It's probably the best you can do. I wanted to go back to something that John said earlier, though. John, you might want to refresh my memory. You were talking a little bit about, I think it was about the different council roles or something. Can you go back to that?
I think what I was touching on was, like when you look at the school board, they tend to speak as one voice, right?
That's what it was.
Not as individuals, where our council is a little bit different.
And I get asked that a lot. And here's what I would say, and I would say it to a school committee too, if they wanted to hear it. I think on issues where you guys are together, or it's really important that the town give one message, it could either be your police chief, it could be Tom, or it could be anybody on your council designated by your council that, Betsy, you're the spokeswoman on blank, whatever it is. And if you all agree on your messages and you're in concert, that's a really good way to go, because one person has a better chance of having a more coordinated message than 7 of you, right? But if it's a 4-3 vote, this is a democracy. You each are elected to explain why 4 of you voted yes and 3 of you voted no, or vice versa. So it's just the way, I think there's no problem with each of you then saying, I'm sorry, even though I was in the majority, I'm gonna explain why I voted the way I voted. I think that's just part of being a beautiful local government democracy. I mean, Supreme Court, often you'll have a majority ruling, but 2 people in the majority will explain a little bit about why they voted the way they did in the majority. So that's what I would say on those issues, and you'll know them when you guys are together, and it's really important that you get one town message. See if you can't designate a spokesperson, whoever it is. But sometimes it's just not possible, and your citizens deserve to know why each one of you voted yes and no, and weigh it for themselves. That's my best answer on that, John.
I mean, on that point, I can count on one hand the number of times the council, I think one hand in my whole tenure here, where the council as a body took a unified position. Typically, it's done by resolution. It's typically, someone offering testimony to the legislature, perhaps. And it's painful to get 7 people to agree on that one position often.
And the message, yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to expand on that a little bit, especially, I mean, we had an agenda item today to have a discussion on the format and content of the leader coming up, but I don't think we're going to get to that. But let me tell you what my thoughts are. I being homebound, I work at home anyway, watched way too much coverage of this virus. However, I enjoyed watching Governor Cuomo's news reports because it was all fact-based. And then at about 3/4 into it, it was his opinion. And I look at the way to communicate, to inform the people, is just have it fact-based. The first item on growth, there's never one item that says, I think, or that it's all fact-based, and then hopefully just sparking enough curiosity to get people to come into the ordinance committee on Zoom or YouTube and listen to the discussion. But again, that's a discussion we can have later. But I definitely agree with you. You don't want, because we're always qualifying our statements, but I'm not speaking for the council. I'm speaking for myself. And sometimes that's an awkward position. But I really think you can communicate, inform people without personal bias, other than the subjective choosing of the facts that you were trying to communicate to. But
And can I ask what safeguards, if any, are in place to guard against that personal bias or opinion creeping into a piece?
well,
We're all capable of it, and I'm not accusing
Correct.
anyone, but I think that's a cautionary note going forward that you don't want to get ahead of yourselves and be stating something on behalf of the council, even unwittingly.
Yeah,
Correct.
I'm not speaking to the leader, I'm speaking to the counselor corner, but yeah, I think definitely one way is maybe not as obvious. So maybe there needs to be, to Eric's point, a headline and a communication is, the counselor corner has been offered to any counselor who wants to write a column. My particular column, I wrote about communication. This is how you find things, when you're looking for things, this is how things work. Counselor Hamill and I wrote one about the budget, and Larissa ended up using that pieces of it. So we did, use facts and really didn't go towards the opinion side. But I think the tool in itself could have some opinion in it if we so decided that we wanted to do that, as long as we made it clear that it's open to any counselor and it's also, not speaking for the council as a whole and speaking, so I think if you are going to offer an opinion on the two pieces I've written, I did not offer an opinion, but I think if you're going to offer an opinion on that open column that we're offering counselors, you need to just be very clear, these are my opinions. I'm not speaking for the counselor. So I think opinion is very valuable. I think
that's a good point. That's a good point, Tom.
Said that if we're speaking with one voice, I would hear that coming much more from, the police chief, the fire chief, certain things, that the town manager communicates out. I would call that the town's voice. It isn't always 100%. As we know, there's things that the town sets off to do that not every counselor agrees with, but it's still the town's point of view is the way that I see it. And I think your voice is pretty clear in terms of who you're speaking for. But then I just think for the council, we need to make sure it's either fact-based, or we're very clear that this is our opinion.
I was just, I wonder, I guess staff isn't put in a comfortable situation. I think Larissa has kind of served as clearinghouse, I won't say editor, but whereas the committee could be its own editorial board or vetting board before a piece goes. Again, I've not seen any problems with any of the pieces done so far, but all of a sudden you're going to be doubling your production.
Right. That's a good point, Tom. And again, you have to forgive me. This counselor corner came in the leader, it even surprised me. I got a hold of the editor. I thought she was going to tell me go away, and she accepted it, said, when can you get me one? So, and we just haven't met, but definitely understand there's some logistics. I really appreciated Larissa's, for lack of a better term, editing what I wrote for the council corner on our thing. Should not only catch typos, but she's very in tune too, and very sensitive, and makes suggestions back. Well, maybe you could rephrase this wording. I see the leader column coming through the communication committee, because I see the leader column being owned by the communication committee. But again, that discussion hasn't happened with the council yet, so I'm a little hesitant to have discussion. But that's the plan. It's just brand new, and like Councilor Weisting just mentioned, there could be a format to where, if it's an opinion, it leads in. We could come up with a standardized format, in my opinion, and then the council has all the freedom to discuss what they want. I'm hoping that we won't get into opinions, because there are so many things going on in our town. It can just be fact-based. And again, the goal is to drive people to the web, and drive people in the committee meetings so they can engage, have the conversation, or sit and listen like we're doing right now. But it's a good point. We just haven't got there yet.
Ken, you mentioned one thing, that the leader was quick to accept your willingness to write a column. I think that's very telling. They're dying for content.
Yes.
The quality of local journalism, and it's not even journalism. There are reporters that are covering this town that I've never met, that are quoting all of us based on them sitting in as an attendee on a Zoom meeting. And yes, so
that's valid, but you're right.
so, but and so we're left to fill the void, and I guess that's okay. But when I started here, every council meeting had a Press Herald reporter, there was a forecaster reporter, and a leader reporter in the audience that we knew.
Right.
That did good quality journalism. And that doesn't exist anymore in large part.
No, it doesn't.
Let me jump in
Yeah.
a couple
Yeah,
points.
go ahead, Derek.
You might want to think about your communications committee just doing 6 bullet points about the purpose of the counselor's corner in the leader is this, and this, and then running that by your full council.
Yeah.
So that your staff, Larissa and Tom, are not in a position of being gatekeepers on something that would make them uncomfortable. And then the beauty of that is if this corner is as successful as it probably will be, future elected counselors who might not be as self-disciplined and restrained as you three are,
Right.
something's in writing that was adopted way back in 2020 or 2021, and this is what you're supposed to do, Joe. This is what this corner. I really think you want to do. It doesn't have to be complicated. It could just be what we at MMA call an administrative guideline. But I think you really ought to do that to get your staff out of the middle of it, and you're going to have some future headaches, I'm afraid, if you don't. Yeah.
I have a little different take on that. So far we haven't got very far, so I don't have a lot to judge it by, but I think the 6 bullet points, could be a good idea. I thought Larissa was very helpful as an editor, and, she didn't have a problem saying, this could be a little controversial. And then you say, you know what, I'm leaving it in. I'm not leaving it in. I think if we try to be an editorial board as a communications committee, it's going to take more time than anyone has. And then it all needs to be done in public. We really don't, as a committee, our work has to be in public. I really don't feel like we can go off and work on these things and pass them back and forth with email and then come out with a finished product.
I don't mean it like that, Betsy, but I'll just throw this not so unlikely hypothetical at you. If you would pass a resolution requiring masking in the Scarborough town limits, saying that we think that businesses should all require masking, and then you would have a future counselor in his one turn in 1 month say, I don't think we need to do masking at all. I don't think COVID's a big deal. Look at our numbers in Scarborough. You're gonna have to wait a whole month for somebody else to respond in that place for that. You might want to I'm just suggesting as an outsider, you might want to just think about some kind of parameters. You shouldn't be an editorial board. You're all entitled to write what you want, but some kind of, here's where we don't go kind of parameters, just in my opinion, to avoid that kind of headache down the road.
No, I agree. And to let you know, reason why, I mean, when I ran, I thought the communication was a little lax in the town. I know better now because I'm part of the council, but my goal is to try to improve that, and that whatever takes place needs to transcend councils because we're forever changing. And so, very good point on the administrative guidelines. I definitely start on that. Appreciate that, John.
Another thing I want to and I'll stop whenever you guys want me to, but I wanted to weigh in on what Tom says. As you guys know, back when you were getting well covered by the Press Herald, I was probably running the newsroom at the Press Herald. That's the difference. No, I'm just kidding. But they don't have, as everybody knows, print media. The reason why there's not reporters in your room anymore is because nobody's reading those newspapers in the first place anymore. So they don't have the money coming in to hire the reporters, right? But you can take advantage of their declining resources. And that's what Tom was talking about. It's a key thing. I talk about it every workshop too. Sending photos to the town leader, sending photos to the Press Herald for events that they used to come with a photographer. How hard is that now? We all have cameras in our pockets. You take a photo, you send 3 photos in. You can really take advantage of their declining resources. And it's not just in print. Their websites are dying for content too. So that's why Tom's right. That's why they said yes, because they're trying to stay afloat without staff and fill their space. But you can strategically take advantage of that opening as well.
John?
Yeah, I was just I think that coming up with those maybe 6 bullet points to guide the leader corner is a great idea. And I think it could be high level and kind of, Ken, to your point, even though we're trying to express facts, we all have our own perception of what the relevant facts are. And whether we're trying to or not, we're expressing our opinion by trying to convey those facts. So I think to Betsy's point, we do kind of have to keep it like this is one counselor's view or perspective, and that's okay. And that could be maybe one of the 6 bullet points that we need
That's
to.
right. No, I agree. We'll definitely.
Right. I mean, a good example of that, John, was I think you did a lot of content around people's homestead exemption and how much their tax rates were really going up based on people's increased homestead exemption. That certainly was fact-based, but there are other facts to look at too. And I think, I wouldn't, if you had done a column on that, I think that would have been good. That would have been your perspective on that. But, it's kind of an example of what you're saying. It's kind of one set of facts that is leading people to an opinion. I don't think we want to get so whatever that word is, so boring. If we look back when we first started talking about Counselor Corner and the e-newsletter, Ken, I'd have to pull it, but I think, you said, look, it ought to have a little pizzazz to it. It ought to have some things that interest people and pull them in. And you guys, you did I thought you do some interesting analysis sometimes, John. I could see some of that going in. Right. I might have a different take on that. I could see that going in. They're both fact-based, but maybe a little different angle. I don't think that's a bad place to go as counselors in our Counselor Corner. If we're going to just do something boring, we might as well just give it to the town, no offense, and talk about, okay, recycle, please don't recycle your plastic cups or, so that's not the kind of thing I think the counselor should be doing. I thought that was kind of exciting analysis the way you did that, John. It was, got me to thinking, and then it got me thinking, well, how else do I want to look at that? So I would see kind of things that, go towards, I don't know where you want to put them, fact-based, but, lead people to think and, and I don't always have a problem saying, hey, and somebody else had a different way of looking at this, and this, you might want to consider this. I really don't have a problem saying that because I just want people to think things through. So, I think we could probably bounce off each other a little bit too if we're writing the column and saying, hey, I know you had this opinion, maybe, what do you think of that? When Don and I did one, we came with different viewpoints on a couple of things from the budget standpoint, and we threw them both in,
I wonder if there could be a consistent byline or disclaimer, just a sentence that this Counselor's Corner is contributions from individual counselors. It doesn't necessarily represent the entire council, just so everyone appreciates what they're going to read below.
That's right.
Something
I think that's really important. I would say that would be good to put that on each one. Regardless of what it is, I think we had some communication come out. I can't remember what it was that we didn't all agree on. And the way it came out, it sounded like it came out and everybody, I got calls, you're for this. I'm like, it was just a communication. It was not something that we were saying, this is how I'm voting or something like that. So I think the disclaimer is a really good idea. And I think it opens up the column a little more.
I agree.
Great. We'll take care of that. Are there any other questions for our guest?
So Eric, just really quick, I know you guys offer a lot of services. We certainly maybe could do this internal, but is helping us with a focus group. Is that something you guys would bite off to chew on? Because, we're certainly, I think, I guess I won't make a motion tonight, but I really hope we make that a high priority. It was definitely a priority before we rolled out our website, but COVID changed a lot. And I think we really ought to, bump that in priority and do it. It was going to be run by the staff. So that's going to happen, Tom's in a transition period, so I'm not putting any pressure there, but is that something in terms of a service that you guys could help us do, or?
Well, what we can't do, Betsy, is with 484 members, go town by town with really anything workshop wise or anything. But what I'd be willing to do, just I'm really interested in how far out you are out in front of this, what you guys are trying to do is pretty on the vanguard of communication in Maine, is I wouldn't mind listening in and then offering, if it would help you, offering my reaction as an outsider who knows a little bit about communication and journalism to what was said. I would be willing to do that, but we can't really hold focus groups for members because we just, that's
too many.
We can't really go town by town like that. But
okay.
I'm interested in the process for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you. I have a question for you, Eric. You mentioned survey. The town council has mentioned surveys several times, especially when there's a hot topic, to get a pulse of the community. From your experience, what's the best way to do that? Because we've done it in the past, and we've had small groups come up with the questions, and distributed via mail. And what's your experience, Terry? What's the best way to have a survey?
I think what we use is real simple. We use SurveyMonkey just like just about everybody else does. What I would suggest you do, but I think what would be valuable is that you get some email addresses from your Facebook users, from your you have them from your e-newsletter, maybe from who watches you on SCTV. Maybe after the corner goes, you mind just sending us your email address? We just want to ask you a few questions about this column. So let's just say you get 200 emails, or maybe you get 400. Just send them like a 10-question SurveyMonkey format. What we're trying to do as a town is use our tools as strategically and effectively as we can. We're just going to ask you a couple questions. We're looking for trends. We want to see who reads what. That's all we're ever going to do with this information. That's what I would suggest you do. Ben Thomas, who's in my department, could definitely help you put that SurveyMonkey tool together. You guys will have to collect those email addresses on your own. There will be some wariness. You should know that that the Freedom of Access Act does not require you to send that to marketers anymore. As long as this is going to be one-way communication, that you're going to send it out and get a response back, but you're not going to keep going back and forth. You don't have to give those email addresses, that whole distribution list out anymore. The state got exempted, and we were able to fight. The towns and cities got exempted for that too. So I would use SurveyMonkey. Try to get a sampling of email addresses from people reading your different tools or watching your different tools, and keep the survey really short. But you do want to have a couple questions in there that are demographic, so you know whether it's a year-round resident responding, whether you know whether it's a summer resident or even a tourist, because your Facebook page and oh gosh, you guys do Twitter? I forget. Your Facebook
we do
page
Twitter. Yeah.
and probably your website are followed by people who just love Scarborough and come there 1 week every 2 years. You probably have people like that too. So that's what I would recommend. And we can, to Betsy's point, Ben and I can help you set that up too. When you get ready to go with that, and I would let the council corner thing get percolated a little bit more, but maybe 6 months from now, let us know that, hey, Eric, remember when you said that? Ben and I can pull that off for you.
Okay.
And we can help you with that anyway.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, with that, I just want to thank you very much for attending.
Thank you.
Great resource, and you'll be hearing from us.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting us in.
Thank you. Okay, so my other computer just died on me, but I do believe the next agenda item is I don't know, Tom, if you were here when we amended the agenda.
Yes.
Okay, so the next agenda item was, I think, item number 5, for the town manager to give an overview of the new, the proposed, I'm going to just refer to it as proposed, communication engagement court, the new proposed position.
Okay.
So tee it up, Tom.
Well, this has been a need expressed for some time. In fact, it's been a consistent theme for all of my entire tenure here. And frankly, it's always been an issue in every town I've worked in. Communication is of the utmost importance. I will say in my experience, it seems to be even more important here in Scarborough. I think we do have a very engaged electorate, and folks want to know, want to be involved. And I think that has a lot to do with it. So this position in particular, we've actually had it formulated by way of a job description drafted for a couple of years now. We've stopped short of actually seeking funding for it. I think in a couple of budget years, we've included it as part of the budget material as positions we would like, but we're not advancing at this point. But when presented with the opportunity afforded by Larissa moving on, I look back at it, and part of that timing had to do with taking advantage of the opportunity. But Liam brings a certain skill set, and he's also bringing with him some fairly heavy HR responsibilities still. But this skill set, though I think Liam has talents that will lend itself very well in this realm, this isn't something that's immediately within the wheelhouse, so to speak, and nor is it mine. And so knowing full well that this is an ongoing interest and need of the town, I saw this as an opportunity and the right time to advance this position, to really underscore the importance of this and make sure going forward that we had the sort of attention to the detail that's really required. You know, what I find, I think we respond to a need and we get something up and running, and then we're off to another project, and it doesn't ever get quite done or followed up on. What I really see the value of a person solely responsible for these sorts of things day in and day out is really staying on top of that. You know, Betsy and I have had conversations back and forth, and she's exactly right. You know, there are things with making sure that the agenda and all the materials are attached and the proper Zoom link, and we're working so hard to get that stuff out the door. There's often something broken in there, and we don't realize it until the weekend. And I really look forward to the opportunity to have someone that's really focused on these sorts of details, and also the big stuff. But the details falling through the crack, I think, is a weak point for us right now. So we modified this position given the circumstance and kind of the opportunity we find ourselves in. It's largely still in keeping with what I've always envisioned. We did do a little survey work. This is not atypical. There's probably, I don't know, 15 positions like this around Maine. And certainly, you know, Scarborough is as sophisticated in operation as there is, frankly, in this state. So this is not a real unique thing. And I really am interested in advancing this. And Liam has given me lots of confidence that there's a lot of talent out there, and that the sort of position we've developed, the opportunity we can afford by way of salary and opportunity should land us a very well qualified person. My preference will be to find someone that has a bit of maturity. I think in a perfect world, I'd like this person to have a bit of life experience, I'll say. And by that, I mean to be savvy enough to appreciate the nuances of topics, particularly if they're following social media, to know what needs to be responded to, what can wait till Monday. You know, I have no doubt there'll be all sorts of recent college grads. That's really not the candidate I'm looking for. I'd like someone that has just a bit of savviness that comes with life experience, frankly. And ideally, this person would really be tuned into what the hot issues and the issues of the day are, what's on the ordinance agenda, and so on and so forth. We do expect the position to help support HR on some limited basis in terms of communicating with potential applicants. Again, somewhat in the realm of communication. I don't see that as a large part of the job, but depending on what's going on and what recruitment we have underway, some assistance and support in that capacity as well. And I think that's mentioned. It's mentioned in the essential functions. So that's kind of a quick overview of why, why we're advancing this at this point.
John?
Yeah, no, I'm excited by the idea, and I think it's a great step forward. We've talked as a committee, the prior communications committee, about advancing this forward as well, because there was a clear need. And, I think you found the right time, Tom, to try to make it work, and it's definitely an important role that we haven't had somebody purely focused on. Yeah, and I think it probably did take quite a bit of Larissa's time, though.
It did. It did. She had a unique skill set, and more importantly, she had an interest in it, which I think shows through the quality of her written material. And it takes someone that was really passionate about it to do it and do it well, I think.
So, Tom, let me ask you, right? Because Larissa did, the e-newsletter, and Larissa did a lot of things. So you're seeing this role purely is that level of function, correct? E-newsletter, communicating back and forth with maybe the departments to get make sure everything is on board with a website and the agendas and the minutes.
In a perfect world, absolutely, but it will depend on the skills of the candidate. I see Liam and I being certainly involved in in reviewing content
Right.
or ideas for stories. So that's not to suggest this person's going to be thrown to the wolves, go figure it out. Everything that happens here, I'm accountable for. So
Right, but you don't see this person like Larissa would do, then engage in the finance committee to help build a model to help us project things. Because like I said, Larissa was a lot to a lot of folks. This is purely communication, correct?
Purely communication, although, we have a catch-all phrase in all of our job descriptions and any other projects and responsibilities assigned.
Right.
If someone has a particular skill set that can help us in other ways, I'm going to draw upon that. I'd be foolish not to. But no, this position is predominantly focused on communications, but we're all in this together.
That's correct. I have a question then just to understand the level. I see that we have a grade 16. What's our grade H? What's our grade structure here at the town?
I'll let Liam speak to that.
Yeah, good question, Counselor. We have we theoretically have 25 different pay grades in our non-union group. Practically, we don't have positions assigned to every grade, and I think the lowest grade we actually have a position assigned to is grade 7. So this is kind of middle of the pack in that matter of speaking. And when we look at some other positions we've added in the last few years, this is kind of in line with that kind of mid-level professional, looking for someone, as Tom said, someone with some experience and ability. So that's kind of where that falls, how we assigned it.
What's the career path on a level 16? I mean,
what, from a pay standpoint?
No, really. I mean, the only question I have on the position is, I know it's been expressed the desire to have a department head as a communication, and I'm hoping that's not what this position is. So, to keep it real simple, what's a department head level versus a 16?
So a department head is either grade 24 or 25.
Okay.
The top end. Yep.
Yeah.
I think that we've talked in the last few years, and I've been part of some of those conversations around the need for communications, and we just spent an hour talking about how to improve our messaging across the organization, whether that's from the elected body, whether that's from staff. And I think that there's more than enough work to be done to really format and reform what we're doing. And so
Right.
I don't think there's any shortage of work. It's something that prior to Larissa's departure, we talked in earnest about advancing. So obviously I'm a bit biased here, but I think that there's more than enough work to do, whether we're talking about focus groups or social media or some targeted research on what's effective. I think obviously I think it's a great move for this council to support.
Well, hearing Eric talk about word choice, I mean, just having someone think about those sorts of things, that's not intuitive to me necessarily, or I don't have time to kind of think it through that level, but really stepping up the level of our communication in all respects, knowing the audience, speaking to the audience, all of those sorts of things.
Messaging.
So I have a couple of comments and questions. So when I read the job description, did you see it, John and Ken?
Yeah, I've got it open right now.
Yeah. So I guess I would just kind of challenge to say, this topic came up in the last hour. It sometimes feels like our communication is a little siloed, between the town and the council. Is there something that should be in this job description about working with the council to reach the communication goals, set forth? I'm not seeing that there. And I do have a concern about, about kind of just losing the focus on that. We are trying to, work as one town ultimately in terms of, we may have a few different goals, but, to get that out. So that would be a comment. A question I would have is, so you mentioned them being attuned to what's going on in the town. What meetings would you see them attending on a regular basis in order to understand the business of the town?
Certainly could be town council. I suspect there'll be any number of committees as well. I'm not going to at all suggest that I'm going to have them attend every single one. I don't think that's necessary, but to have more than just a working knowledge and to understand the nuances behind the issues of the day, whatever that takes. I think being here and working in the executive offices, they'll get a fair amount of that by osmosis, frankly. They'll know what's ticking, so to speak.
Okay. And in the job description, I kind of saw a little bit of overlap between, I think, what, not just what Larissa was doing some, but the webmaster and Colette also helps, get a lot of this stuff out. I guess, I think what we would all hope would be this person wouldn't just become an administrative assistant really for getting these things done. So like what type of a project might you envision, once the person is here for a little bit, type of communications project that you would say, hey, let's take this on. I mean, maybe the focus group was a good one we talked about tonight, but do you
Sure.
have any other ideas of, projects right off the get-go, that you see would be something this person might take on?
I honestly have not given it that much thought. I think I alluded to a bit of it, some of it earlier. I would want to first and foremost make sure that we have good routines in place. So we're doing things consistently and the same through repetition. And it's the simple stuff like making sure agendas are posted and all the relevant materials are there and that the links work and so on and so forth. It sounds, and it is rudimentary, but we continually have challenges there. So that would be a real simple one out of the gate. But you mentioned the focus group. That's the sort of project that this person would take on and see through from conception through completion.
I think I'm really intrigued by the survey that Eric spoke to in terms of understanding what platforms and mediums our folks are being reached by, what those demographics look like.
Right.
I would imagine that perhaps some more senior members of the community would rely on the leader as their primary information source, where perhaps younger folks might be more the social media piece.
Right.
And so I think that would be an interest, kind of an interesting project to understand. But I also think one of the things that got brought up in that conversation was around how are we messaging out? Do we have a plan for if a project or an initiative, or whether that's an ordinance, if that meets certain thresholds, are we making sure we're communicating on multiple mediums?
Right.
And is there a formalized mechanism for that? And so I think that's all part of the refined process that I think that this person, again, with their primary focus being communication and community engagement, that's the lens in which they need to see these things through. So I again, think it's going to be a phenomenal resource, not only for staff and communicating out day to day and those ongoing events and employee spotlights and all of the fluff stuff and the good stuff, but also really being an asset for the council to work through some of these things and
Right.
focus on these things.
Yeah, I think that'd be really cool because Eric's Survey Monkey thing was a good idea, but as we all know, it doesn't get to our older population. So, part of a project might be some telephone, flat out telephone calls like we made during the pandemic, and get some feedback on that. So yeah, I really like that idea. So and then another question I had was, Tom, have you thought about, I think the pandemic just stressed and showed where we had weaknesses, because, if this one wasn't working and then we had to add in a whole new thing called Zoom, and then, we had to try to make sure we were communicating the old way, so I think it was a big challenge around that. And some of the things we've come up with, people seem to really like the Zoom. They like the live YouTube streaming. We kind of have SCTV over in a whole nother department. Have you given much thought to any kind of synergies across IT, SCTV, and this communications person? Is again, I would hate to see us get into silos, because I think we already have a couple of silos, maybe 2 or 3, where the left hand is maybe doing something and I'd say, well, this is wrong on the website. Well, I have to get contact with these 4 people in order to get this changed. And that's not our job. That's a different department. Everyone was perfectly nice. Don't get me wrong. But I think, the tech is rapidly changing. And I guess, I think tech would be very important for this person to be very tech savvy in my mind, because while they need to be a great communicator, they need to understand the tools, I think, as well. to be able to direct those who manage the tools for us, like the IT department. So have you given much thought to any kind of overlaps we already have, or how this person will interact with, with some of the other departments whose job it is actually communication, even though they're pulled, they're from a different, department?
Yeah, I think Larissa really laid some great foundation and great work that I think will be a good starting point. We have identified individuals in each department, major department, that are kind of the communicators, and they have certain access to our website and also authority when it comes to social media. She went so far as to develop a consistent persona, so everyone is speaking somewhat in the same voice. So, we might have 6 different posters, but you wouldn't necessarily know that it was a different person that posted this week. So a lot of the work that she began, I think, is really strong foundation for us to work on. So I would disagree slightly that I don't think we have too many silos in this regard. She was the one that was interfacing with SCDV as needed and our IT department. And I would agree. I would love someone that has a tech background. I'm not sure if we can find that person or afford that person that has the requisite talents on the communication side, but time will tell in that regard. As you were talking, and Ken was mentioning as well, during the pandemic, one thing I did appreciate more than ever was the power of video content and kind of the immediacy, and I must admit the ease of getting a message across. It's not something that I'm particularly comfortable with, but I think I need to get more and more there. So I'm really interested in exploring more of that different kind of content. And it's not just me speaking into my laptop. It's more footage out in the community and tours of our new public safety building. There's just so much more that we could do that we're just simply not doing it, partially because we don't have someone that's thinking about this all the time.
Right. Yeah. And I would just, I guess, emphasize some stuff we said in that meeting. This is my last point is, I think, all of that will be great as long as we're getting the basics and, people can find what they're looking for and they can find the forums online that are easy to get to and things like that. And then we pick 2 or 3 tools, we do those well, maybe we add a tool or something. So it is a good opportunity, to make sure that, we're meeting, I think, what the taxpayers want and expect. I think that focus group, will help us a little bit in that too. But people, this is a very active community and they want to be able to find information and get the information they want and with relative ease.
Sure.
So
just appreciate, Larissa was probably dedicating on average 8 to 10 hours a week. Some weeks more, some weeks less, perhaps, but I would say on average 10 hours.
Yeah.
So just imagine if we can have 35 hours on communication,
Right.
and someone that actually, in a perfect world, has a background in this. So I'm really excited about dedicating resources and time and attention toward this function. I don't see it going away.
No, I think it's a great move. General question though, but it's around communication. We had an email today from one of our favorite residents with a very valid point. Just tell me where this would land. We have 22 committees in the town of Scarborough. Some are standalone, some are appointed by the council. There really is no way to contact the committee members. There's no email addresses or anything. So the suggestion was, could we have committee level email addresses? Which sounds very doable from my perspective, but where would you start with that?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I would agree. And I say that just because these are citizen volunteers. Some of them may be perfectly comfortable providing their personal contact information. I might suggest what we could do.
no, it wouldn't be their personal contact. It would
Committee
be,
level.
if I want to email long range planning committee and know that it went to all the members, I would email, like I do town council at, Scarborough, I would be LR
Yeah, not
whatever.
individual. Yeah,
Yeah.
not individual.
The way we've handled that in the past is that there's a staff liaison to the committees and that the communication goes to them. It's incumbent on us to communicate that out. I'm certainly interested and willing to pursue that further. But
Yeah, let's have that discussion, because
Sure.
even if we set up the email and it goes to the liaison, okay, it's better than what we have right now, because you mentioned that makes sense. I never even thought of that. I wasn't, I never thought about going to a committee and say, oh, okay, who's the liaison? I'm going to email them. I'd rather be just Joe Public and go, hey, Long Range Planning Committee at scarboroughmaine.com. Here's my question. So we can route it any way we want, but
sure.
anyway,
Yeah.
it's-
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I've often wanted to just send those emails. So like it does seem a little bit of a hole that we don't have it. And it can be a challenge because if it's just a routing and you're talking about people's personal email, then they have to know how to, as a volunteer, how to get it on their side. So sometimes that can be a bit of a challenge because you might think you're getting them when they're not, which is where if it's going through the liaison to them, that person is probably a little more confident. Yes, they got it. I heard back from them. But then you've got a person in the middle. So it's something we should take up. I think it would be a good idea to do it.
Yeah. It could be just
How we do it,
box.
maybe we can figure out. But yeah.
Yeah, and Ken, I don't recall what you're referring to today, but planning board is one where fairly often there's written public comment by way of email. And I'll give planning staff kudos. I think they do a very good job of making sure that the planning board receives those emails and they're part of the record as well. And of course, your council Google groups, you may not like it. You're all seeing everything whenever it comes in.
Yeah, I think his point was, we don't always, if I'm out in the public, I don't always think, oh, I will go find out who the staff liaison is. Oh, it's Jay. Oh, I'll email Jay and tell him I want it to the planning board. If we could cut some steps out there to make it easier for people, I go to the planning board page. If you have a comment for the planning board, email planningboard@scarborough.maine, scarboroughmaine.org.
Sure. John?
Yeah, I think it's something worth discussing. I mean, I'd like to understand why we don't have that today. There might be some valid reasons. We did it for the for the community center. And I didn't see any issues. It seemed to work pretty well, where we had a group email and our personal emails stayed personal, but everybody was able to see the emails that came to the group and point somebody to respond. So I think there's some potential benefit to doing that. It'd certainly make it easier to reach a committee member or a committee overall, or maybe the right way is to do it through the council liaison. I don't know. It's something that we should probably put on the agenda and kind of try to talk through some of the pros and cons of different approaches.
Okay.
I mean, if all else fails, I hope people would figure out, well, I'll contact the town manager or a member of council, which often people do, right? For help on whatever the matter is. But yeah, that's certainly a point that we should explore further.
Any other questions for either Tom or Liam? Thanks.
So, yeah, I do have a quick question, Ken. So about these, because I think we asked for this for day one, the subscriptions to the agendas for the emails you want to subscribe to. How do we get that off the queue? I know, how we get it communicated out, but is a whole nother thing. But, we might personally start talking to some people and saying, hey, here's how you do it. And then we get a little experience with people doing it, finding out how it's going. How do we get off this stick with that? Don said it's ready to go, but I don't know what the next steps are.
It's available on the website now. It's under was it Be Informed, Get Informed button?
I think it had a couple glitches, Tom.
Okay.
I think it was being worked. Larissa, I talked with her like the day before she left, and
right.
she told me that should be fully operational. I think she told me on the 17th. And I think it was going to be a little bit more robust than originally designed. It was, I thought, if I recall the conversation correctly, it was actually going to push the agenda also. So
yeah, that piece I'm not sure of, but I can tell you personally, about 2 weeks ago, as soon as we went live, I went on and there's a drop-down menu. We can talk about the options that come forward.
Yeah.
As I recall, there's 6 or 7 or 8.
Yep.
And I signed up just to test it. What I can answer for you is whether with that indication, you'll automatically get the push notifications, and I'll follow up on that.
Right.
Yeah, the agenda was, what we were hoping, because if I'm really interested in the ordinance committee, I assign to the agenda, and I get that agenda every time, and I see something that's of interest to me, hey, the town has just achieved, I've I found out right up front, the very first time that topic was going to be discussed, you know, at the first ordinance meeting, if that's, you know, kind of my thing or whatever. Without
under the
really doing anything. It's automated at that point.
Under the resident button, there's a drop down that says, what's the name of your campaign? Stay connected. And there's
Yes, stay connected.
9 different options right now. And I think we can expand that if you like.
Yeah. I think we're in a good place. I mean, you know, a good start. I think over
We
a
don't
year's
know if
time,
is it pushes an agenda or not. We don't know that.
No, I'll find out. I'll get the answer and respond.
Okay.
But I think we're collecting email addresses right now. So the good news is we're starting to harvest that information.
Yep. Okay. Again, I don't have an agenda in front of me. My laptop's dead. Anybody have the agenda in front of them?
Public comment?
Any public comment? I see 5 participants.
What did I say?
I guess not.
Councilor Johnson, just a quick question. So we are going to defer the discussion on the leader content until, do you want to postpone that till the next meeting?
Yes, future, everybody agree to put that on the next agenda item? The next committee meeting?
Okay. Is there a motion for that? The table?
I make a motion to table item number 6, is it?
Yes, it is.
Second,
All those in favor?
Yeah, you gotta call the names.
Oh, I do. All right. Bear with me here. Councilor Gleistein,
yes.
Councilor Clucci,
Yes.
Councilor Johnson.
Yes.
Great.
And as part of that, back to Eric's points about the administrative guidelines on the counselor or the leader thing, if you want to give that some thought, maybe bring that forward to have that discussion under that umbrella of the guidelines of doing the leader column. We could have that discussion.
In the meantime, Ken, when is the next column needed? And are we still doing Counselor Corner in the newsletter?
Yes, we are. And again, those are discussions. I apologize. We just haven't got together to have it. But yeah, we still have options for 2 per month and the leader once a month. And the leader is typically the first Friday of the new month, which will coincide nicely with the bi-monthly e-newsletter. So again, from a coordinated topic at times, that might be worthwhile figuring out how to weave all those together. Now, in the initial introduction to the leader, the last point is that because it was to invite people into the ordinance committee on the 16th, because we're having a joint committee with a long range. I think the long range planning is coming. At least their input is coming. Because if you remember, the ordinance committee was charged by the town council to review the growth management ordinance and to bring forward any changes they thought might be necessary. That's all. It was a generic. May go through the process and go, no changes needed. This article was just about that. Did state some growth in the town and said the following leader column would recap the results of that meeting. Okay. So I looked at 2 slots around growth to buy some time to get organized with categories, discussions with a full council, to get things like this administrative thing, then to get a tempo going. That's all. I try to buy some time.
Okay.
Okay.
You know, it could be in a pinch, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. You could be using the same content for both the e-newsletter and the leader on occasion.
Absolutely. Eric had mentioned that about repurposing, maybe change it up a little bit, but repurposing the same topic.
You'll have some duplication, but you have a much wider audience, obviously, with the leader.
Correct. But as Eric said, a lot about communication is repeating that message over and over. So again, I think we can get there. It's going to take a little time to get there, but I feel comfortable that we're getting in place the mechanics. Like, that's why I really support this new role that you brought forward. I think if we really work together, we can be a pretty informed community for those that want to be informed. I'm just not going to get disillusioned on the folks that don't want to be informed. And we do have some of those. So we can just do the best we can do and take it from there. So.
Yeah, incidentally, to my comment earlier about local journalism, the new reporter for the Forecaster, Sean Murphy, I don't know if any of you have had the occasion, he actually is a journalist. He's interested, he's asking questions, he's doing a little investigation.
Yeah.
So I actually have a standing weekly meeting with him, 9 o'clock on Friday mornings. And I found that in my career that that's helpful to have a relationship and an opportunity to talk with the local press. So I'm hoping that's going to bear some fruit, that he's going to start providing some good, rich content covering the important things in town.
There'll be no surprise on the council, all right?
It's certainly
Well,
my
we get
goal.
surprised, all right.
Just kidding.
I don't
so-
control what he writes. He often has his issues that he asks me about. I try to do a good job of making you aware when there's a story that's going to appear.
Correct.
We get surprised. Just if I can summarize a couple of what you said, Ken, you won't be looking for a column, at least for the leader, until October.
Correct.
You will be looking for some part 2 of the newsletter columns. So
Correct. To remember, we have, and we don't have to use it. And unfortunately, we have let opportunities slip by, but not to make excuses. I think it was COVID and budget. I don't know what you guys.
there'll be another newsletter coming out 8/15.
8/15.
Are you guys, Liam and Tom, are you going to keep up the schedule, or are you going to do a transition period while Larissa?
Nope, our intent is to stay right on track.
Okay,
Took
good.
care of the one on Saturday, yep.
Yeah, that's important to keep that up. So yes, we need to come up. And remember, I try to be gentle, reminding there are 7 counselors, and everybody has an opportunity to express, because with the e-newsletter, the intro part, at least all the ones that I've written, clearly state this below article is my personal opinion my opinion as a personal counselor. I don't say I'm not speaking for the council, but it's clear, it's a disclaimer right up front. It's a safe place for any counselor to come and express their own opinion on a topic of the day. Okay, if you read that, you should be clear that you are not speaking for the full council. So we should have something like that on the leader.
Okay, so do we want to put that out there for the 15th? See if anybody takes us up on it. If nobody does, I'll volunteer, but you want to put it out to the other 4?
I'll
See if
put it
anybody
to,
wants to
I'll
call.
mention it. I'll mention it on our Wednesday, at the end of our Wednesday meeting. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Ken, one thing, we did get an email with that was titled public comment. I don't know what the typical procedure is for that. Should we
Oh, read it?
somewhere?
Read it.
Yeah.
I didn't read that to be read into the record, but hold on a second.
Yeah, I think it's for the record.
Is it for the record?
Well, he said, please consider this my public comment for today's meeting.
Just bear with me. Thank you for bringing that up, John.
I have it if you just want it read.
Yeah, could you just read that into the record? Doesn't matter who does it.
This is from Steve Hanley, 6 Old Colony Lane, Scarborough. Dear members of the Communication Committee, please consider this my public comment for today's meeting of the committee. I have 2 fairly basic suggestions relating to communication between residents and our elected officials. 1, the current pandemic forced new modes of communications between the public and town officials, specifically through Zoom, YouTube meetings. I'm not sure whether it's measurable or not, but I have a sense more residents have tuned in to town school meetings than in the past. In any event, I believe Zoom, YouTube have significantly improved resident access to public meetings. I hope that as we transition back to in-person meetings of town and school boards and committees, that we do not lose that enhanced access and functionality. In short, I would believe it would be very worthwhile to continue the Zoom YouTube function as they currently exist, even as in-person meetings are reinstituted. I've heard a brief mention recently about a contractor making modifications to our audiovisual systems for a post-pandemic world. I hope this committee will carefully consider those modifications and insist on maintaining the access and functionality we currently have. As a specific example, YouTube videos of meetings are available much sooner than SCTV videos on demand were in the past. YouTube also offers better viewing options such as playback speed options. Number 2, please consider adding a group email for each of the town's numerous 22 for the website appointed boards and committees. This is of significant importance in allowing members of the public to make direct contact with the boards and committees that consist of appointed members. Currently, the only way to contact these boards, committees is by attending a meeting or sending an email to a town council or a staff member associated with the board committee with the request that it be forwarded. That makes direct contact with the members unnecessarily difficult. Thank you for considering my suggestions. I would be pleased to respond to any questions you may have, Steve Hanley. So that's great. Thanks, John, for remembering that, because it did bring up one point that I think we should definitely address in the next meeting, which is that all the committees that we were not formally recording, especially like the long range planning committee, I think that's been a huge plus getting those recorded. And even this meeting, this would not normally be recorded in the old world. So I think we really have to find a way to keep the recordings going of all the town committees. I think they're hugely important.
Yeah, that would be a council discussion, I'm assuming, correct?
Yes, your council rules indicate which meetings are to be recorded. Yep.
So that could be a possible council rules enhancement with a discussion.
Correct. I will simply state, this isn't speaking against transparency whatsoever. These are public proceedings, but I know from past experience, many times volunteers on your advisory committees they're not running for public office. They don't, so they're reticent to be televised. And so
Right.
Whether that has a chilling effect on who volunteers, I won't go that far, but that's been a concern I've heard expressed in the past.
I would say, they've signed up for committees that are, that really impact people's lives, like long range planning committee, and many of the others. So, it would be unfortunate if it did, but I think it's well past time. And, we actually started recording them and posting them without a change to the rule because of the pandemic, which is kind of interesting. So I think, it's definitely overdue for a discussion.
Yeah,
And,
I was just referring to advisory committees. I mean, any decision-making body, council, planning board, zoning board, board of appeals, has always been televised. That's not the
right.
Not
Yeah,
the
and I'm
case
saying
for advisory.
the ones that we gained out of the pandemic have been huge. And it's definitely worth taking that forward, because like long range, that's been recorded or accessible, et cetera.
So we should bring that forward to the chair as an agenda item for discussion, right?
You should. Yep. And then just let me speak to Mr. Hanley's points. We will have capability going forward to have Zoom participation by the public and counselors, so long as the governor's order still allows it. I think that would be the exception to the rule. If you're meeting in person, I think the expectation is the counselor's present, but for some unique circumstance. But we will have the capability of having remote participation by the public, and YouTube is here to stay for sure.
Good. Good. So can I get a motion to adjourn now?
So move.
Second.
All in favor? Leah?
Councillor Gleisteen,
Yes.
Councillor Clucci,
Yes.
Councillor Johnson.
Yes.
Perfect. We are
Thank you very much, folks.